Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another cast. Today, our guest is joining us all the way over from the UK. He's casted since 2017. He's been around. Yeah, he has a wide array of guests, such as artists, musicians, authors, and many more. And they cover all kinds of fun, interesting, and honest conversations. On the other side of things, he has a Star Wars Comics in Canon weekly show where he kind of tackles different aspects of the comics, kind of pieces them all together. It's really great, and he also has other ideas that he does that involve around the timelines, even in the Legends era. It kind of goes back and touches on them a bit too. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you the host of Genuine Chit Chat, Mr. Mike Burton. How you doing, man?
Thank you. I'm doing really, really well. Thank you so much for having me on, Stevie. I really appreciate it, and I've been really enjoying your content that you've been putting out into the Star Wars sphere, the YouTube sphere, whatever one wishes to call it, because you are speaking about sort of positivity without being sickly sweet. You know, you're talking about when you speak to people, you want to talk to them about the things they really enjoy about Star Wars, not necessarily the things they hate, but it's still a free space to be able to speak openly and critique certain things, which I really appreciate. And obviously yourself does that. Ben of Star Wars Timeline, he does that. And I think he's probably one of those threads that's vaguely connected us and things. And so, yeah, I really appreciate everything you're doing. And thank you very much for that lovely intro. But yeah, Genuine Chit Chat, that's my main, air quotes, main show. I've been doing that, 5 years now, 5.5 years really. So been a while, starting to get grey in my facial hair, so it's starting to happen. And then COVID happened, and I or lockdown over here in the UK, and I decided to start. I'd kind of already started the idea of doing a Star Wars podcast, and then it hit, and I was like, I've got all the time in the world. And now it's sort of post that, and everything's somewhat returning back to normal, and it's like trying to find the time, because all I want to do is podcast and consume Star Wars content and spend time, I should probably say it in case she listens, with my partner Megan and our dog Willow. Like, aside from all that stuff, all I want to do is, you maybe see just from behind me, there's just a few Star Wars books and things, not quite as amazing as your collection, but anytime I have an excuse to just chat with someone who's as passionate about Star Wars and who's as open and willing to try the variety that Star Wars brings, I just love it. I jump at the opportunity.
Yeah. That you couldn't have said that better. That's why I started doing this. It's why you started doing this, and it builds and carries. We were talking beforehand. It's cold here today, -21, by the way. So I just want to throw that out there. But Ben from Star Wars Timeline, it's kind of funny how everybody kind of daisy chains themselves together, or through, you have great content, and I found you through him. Like I said, and even not on the Star Wars side of things, like you have some really cool and fun conversations, man, for sure. And I forgot the gal's name, but the one talking about Buddhism, I thought that was kind of
Radhika Rao.
Yeah,
she's fantastic.
Yeah,
she's really, really interesting.
I thought that was interesting, so I wanted to tell other folks that you have a lot of variety to you. And but Star Wars, that it's huge. It's been a big part of connecting and meeting new people and new friends. And I'm just so glad that you're here today, man, with us to talk and tell your story. And I appreciate the kind words very much.
Yeah, it's awesome. I just love, I love talking about Star Wars, but I love talking to people. One of my favorite things is when you speak to someone and you see the sort of, I describe it as the light behind their eyes. Sort of, they light up and they get so excited talking about the thing they're passionate about. Some people it's their religion, some people it's Star Wars, some people it's music they're making. And so I kind of started Genuine Chit Chat as a way to just talk to people who are passionate about things without, if you contact someone, even if it's just someone you know, and say, hey, do you want to come over and hang out in my lounge for like an hour or two and just talk about stuff you like? People are like, are you going to kill me? And it's like, but when you say, no, but I'm going to record it and put it on the internet, they're like, okay, you're probably not going to kill me. I'm going to just suddenly trust you because you're recording it. But I started doing that with friends who are close to mine. And then as the podcast grew and more people reached out, I then had to somewhat vet people. I can't say yes to everyone, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to and have all the time to. But from there, it kind of expanded a bit more. And so I started talking to people and reaching out to people. I was just like, I want to talk to someone about this. And some of my other friends in the podcast sort of sphere know my intrigue in religion. So Radhika was introduced to me by a friend of mine called Tonya. So most of my recent podcasts on Genuine Chit-Chat are, they're not about Star Wars specifically, but most of the podcasts have got video now. And yeah, it's about a wide variety of things. There's an episode that'll be coming out shortly, and that's all about sort of misconceptions about pregnancy and childbirth. So all these things that generally men aren't really taught, but also things that in the education system, both in the UK and the US, we're not really told about either. So speaking of Buddhists, speaking about pregnancy, I've spoke to Cavan Scott and Claudia Gray of Star Wars. So it's like, it's quite, quite a wide berth, but it's all in good fun.
Yeah, and it's excellent. And your mannerisms and how you present yourself, and it's excellent. So folks, you got to check them out there.
Thank you.
But on the Star Wars side of things, when you hear that term Star Wars, what's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
For me, it's the Force. For me, the idea of the Force has always been something that's intrigued me. And I think it's the thing that sets Star Wars apart from most other franchises of a similar nature. I wouldn't, calling it sci-fi, it definitely has sci-fi elements, but it's more of like a space fantasy sort of idea. And I just think the Force itself is and obviously coming with that is the Sith, the Jedi, and lightsabers. But the Force is the inherent thing that Star Wars has that other sci-fi properties don't. I mean, Dune, to a degree, because I didn't read Dune or anything like that, but the Dune movie, the more recent one by Denis Villeneuve, that could have been in Star Wars. So I really say that when I say it's unique to Star Wars, it's actually unique to Dune, and then Star Wars kind of poached it a bit, and Star Wars blew up and became more famous than Dune. So for me, it's been the Force, but that, the idea that everything's connected, and the idea that you can basically have magic in Star Wars and have this almost limitless bucket of just cool stuff you can pull out because of the intricacies of the Force. And I haven't got an issue with Star Trek or anything like that. I watched the Star Trek movies made by J.J. Abrams, and I've seen bits and pieces of Star Trek. It's not my jam necessarily. I get it, but that's a lot more about exploration and the spaceships and things like that. But for me, mine's more about the spiritual side, the religion of it. I do like the political element when it's done right, but they don't always land. But I enjoy that for Star Wars. It's the Force, the thing that connects it all together, and that runs as a parallel to the thing that I love the most about Star Wars, which is the fact that it all connects. I know a lot, I'm sure we'll get into canon and legends, but it's like, how many fandoms have it that you have two incredible continuities with a huge range of content that both have got the same 6 movies that connect them, as well as the first 6 seasons of Clone Wars? If you, those, and the movie technically of Clone Wars, but I'm not overly a fan of that. But, what a lot of people don't like to kind of pit legends and canon against each other. I know you're not one of them, but I think that how lucky are we? You get Marvel comics and DC comics, which I've read a fairish amount of. I've read a lot of Carnage and symbiote stuff because I love Carnage and Venom and things in the comics. And with them, they get reset so often. The DC, they launched the New 52, and then they did this, and then they did that, and now they're like, oh, everything's kind of ish canon, however you want to play it. And Marvel reset things quite a lot, and then they got the Ultimate Universe. And if you start reading Spider-Man now, it's on issue like the Amazing Spider-Man 1000 and something, and it's like, how am I meant to get on board with that? But with Star Wars, it's like, hey, you can literally watch any of the movies or never watch the movies. They're probably a good way to start, but you could just start reading a good percentage of books or comics, and you don't need to know everything else. The Darth Bane books, for example, which I only recently read because I started with canon, I got into Legends retroactively, but like, you don't need to have read any Star Wars in your life to read. If anyone in the world, apart from probably maybe children because of the mature content, read the Bane trilogy or the High Republic books or anything like that, you can still get into it. And that's, I think, that the freedom I love with it is that, unlike, say, the MCU, which I really enjoy, you kind of have to watch them chronologically to a degree for things to make sense. Star Wars, it's like, you got the 9 movies, you can watch the trilogies completely out of order. You could do the Danny Trejo watching order, which is like, I think it's 4, 2, 5, 3. Yeah, but it ignores 1. All kinds of stuff. So I'm like, do it. People could enjoy Star Wars however you want, as long as you are enjoying it. And that's kind of my jam with Star Wars.
Yeah, that's I feel you on the Force. There's a few things I want to touch on because you've made a lot of great points there. But the Jedi and the Force, like trying to, I was going to ask you, and we'll get to it eventually, but like, how do you incorporate Star Wars into your everyday life somehow? Okay, so for example, I want to be more Jedi. I want to be more chill, calm, collective, not so reactive, aggressive right away. But now with my kids, for example, they get out of line. Well, then the Sith comes up to play. You know what I mean? So, but the Force has always intrigued me too. That connecting of everything is just incredible, and it is so intriguing. And like you were saying about like the fantasy elements of it, exactly. Once you get farther back in the expanded universe, like there's sorcery and alchemy, and it's all this crazy stuff that, you know, would be cool to see to come to, you know, into live action per se. So yeah, there's nothing else like it. There's no other fandom out there. I mean, like you said, Marvel and DC, but that's a whole different topic. And
it's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole other. How much time you got? You know, because I just recently watched as far as I could in the movies in chronological order, and it's just crazy. So being a fantasy, that's what makes it so magical. You know, that's what gives it, in my opinion, because there's nothing else like that. Star Trek, nothing. I never got into it. Nothing against it, but it's just about traveling the galaxy. You know, and people dig that. So, you know, everybody's got their own cup of tea and their own flavor, like you were saying.
Yeah,
so,
I agree completely.
So what's your first memory of Star Wars? Like, what's the moment?
Yeah, so with me, people who, I always bring this up, and people, when I first mention it, kind of get taken aback by it because they feel like it's quite a dark subject. But for your listeners, follow me with this. About 10 years ago, my dad passed away. He died of cancer. He was ill for nearly 2 years. And he is the thing that always connected me to Star Wars. I think he rather wished himself to be a bit like Harrison Ford. He loved Indiana Jones. He loved Star Wars, the original trilogy. So he was always, anything Harrison Ford, he was just, you know, in it. And so I think that what I remember from growing up and things is always on over here in the UK. There's a channel called ITV. It's just channel 3. And on that for must be 10 years. On Fridays, they would play, every Friday, they'd play like a big film. It would be part of a franchise. So it'd be like, oh, here's at the time, 3 Jurassic Park movies. Then here's, you know, lots of Spielberg stuff, you know, E.T. and those sort of things. Then let's do all the Indiana Jones films. But every like 6 months or so, maybe even more frequently than that, they would then do, here's the 6 Star Wars films. You know, they do one every Friday. So every Friday night, especially when I was younger, you know, because my dad passed away before The Force Awakens was announced. So he's never known about anything outside the 6 movies or anything sort of further than that. But I just remember on Fridays always, or coming home or having dinner or whatever, and he'd be, you know, normally he'd be reading a newspaper or reading a book or something with the TV on a film he's seen quite a few times. And he'd always have Star Wars or Indiana Jones on. I just always remember those. And then when I was growing up, that was when the prequels were coming out as well. So, you know, first it was just the original trilogy he was watching a lot on ITV and things. And then as the films came out slowly, you know, years after they were at the cinema, because a lot of young listeners may not realize when films used to come out at the cinema, you usually had to wait, you know, months and months and months, if not years sometimes, to actually ever watch them again, you know, at home release, you know, DVDs or VHS tapes or anything like that. Even Game of Thrones Series 1 would take over a year to come out on home release. And that's not that long ago. Whereas nowadays, it's like, oh, it's on the cinema. Also, if you wait 3 days, it's on Disney+. It's just, so I just have this memory of him always with Star Wars. And my dad was the kind of person that he wasn't interested in everything, but if he found out you were interested in something he either found valuable or was interested in as well, he would go full ham on it. So he would, anytime I was interested in Star Wars, I've got lightsabers. Oh God, I used to have lightsabers. You know, when I moved out and lots of stuff, I think I got rid of it. I think most people now, when they're adults, regret all these Star Wars toys and figures that they got rid of. That's why you're making it up now in the background.
Yes, 100%. You nailed it. You caught me.
So it was always like I had some Star Wars toys and that sort of stuff, but video games was something in my youth that I really went in on. I used to love playing video games, and when I watched Star Wars after Episode 3 came out, I watched the Clone Wars movie. I watched the 2D animated Legends Clone Wars from 2003, made by Jaron Tartovsky, or the guy who made Afrojack. Really, really cool stuff. I really enjoyed that, but it was on Cartoon Network, really random times. It's like, oh, at 7:58, you have to tune in to watch 2 minutes of Clone Wars, and then tomorrow at 6:43, another 2 minutes of Clone Wars in an ad break of another show. And you're like, how am I meant to keep up with this? And then they released one DVD, so which I have got. But really, after the third film came out, 2005, when I was about 11-ish, I didn't say I fell out of love with Star Wars, but it's kind of, I backed away from it a little bit. More things started to pop up. I think I got into Doctor Who around that time, because that's when they rebooted Doctor Who and Christopher Eccleston came in. So I always had some sort of sci-fi-esque thing kind of as a placeholder. But then as I got a bit older, Dad started buying me some of the video games. Now, I'll put my hands up and apologize to everyone. I haven't played Knights of the Old Republic, and I am sorry. I know the broad strokes of the plot, but I'm afraid I just don't know. But I instead played, obviously, Star Wars Battlefront was classic, Lego Star Wars, as well as Bounty Hunter, some of the Jedi Starfighter games, Pod Racing, Rogue Squadron games, you know, all that sort of stuff. So my in for Star Wars Legends was playing video games a lot. And the game that really got me the most was a game I'd never even heard of, and it's The Force Unleashed. And obviously that's now renowned as arguably, probably other than KOTOR, probably the best Legends game. I think other than KOTOR and Battlefront, I think that's generally held up very high. And for me, it's the story. And I've got a tattoo of it as well, specifically because Dad just came home one day. I think I did really well on some exams at school. And he said, he used to read the newspaper and check for reviews of films or games that I would like, even though he never played a video game in his life. And he liked movies, and he was quite into certain ones, but he wasn't like a movie buff. So he would look in the newspapers and all these places for highly reviewed things. Like he bought me Mass Effect just because he heard it was really good. And so he did that. And when he got me The Force Unleashed, I was like, okay, played the first level. And I was like, I'm Vader running through Kashyyyk, mowing down Wookiees, and I've never experienced anything like this in my life, and I was just bought in. And so, you know, that moment especially, it clinged to me, The Force Unleashed, a lot more. I loved it as a kid, then I went away, then came back, and so the video games were always something that kind of kept me going. And then when Dad passed away, it was very bizarre because he passed away, and it was within, I think it was he passed away when I was 19. This year, I'm going to be 29. So it's 10 years this May. So that is 2013. So he died May 2013. I think the trailer or the announcement for The Force Awakens was 2014, I think, because the film came out 2015. So it was this weird time I was kind of grieving and dealing with my dad passing in a variety of ways. And then this shining light came through and said, you remember that film franchise and those video games you love to play that you got really connected to as a kid and your dad? Disney have bought that and are now going to pump loads of money into it and make more films. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? So it's been this weird thing for me where Star Wars was a massive part of my life for a little while. I started to ease up a little bit and then kind of just do it through the games and things. Then I eased up a bit more. I was going to sort of college and getting girlfriends and sort of other things to occupy my time in a certain way. And then he passes away. And then straight after that, the canon. It's like, well, the canon's been reset. You know, there's like 1 billion or 380 odd books in Legends or something. Here's a clean slate. And so sort of connecting with my dad from there, it's been intertwined in an interesting way. So yeah, that's a very long answer. And I've probably answered about 10 of your questions in one go, but it's just a nice open way to kind of explain what Star Wars means to me.
And I appreciate that. And that's a beautiful, it's sad and beautiful that you have that memory. You know, something that you built off of, man. And I'm sorry, I'm sorry that your dad passed.
It's okay. I'm happy to talk about it. I appreciate the nice words, but yeah, I talk about it very openly on my podcast as well. I speak about Lost and stuff on Genuine Chit-Chat. So yeah, but it means a lot to me and it changed me as a person, his passing, in a variety of ways. But I'll say to people to be optimistic because I try, since his passing, I'm very much more of an optimist, but I'll say that his passing was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it was the best thing that ever happened to my sort of character. It taught me a lot. It made me change in a lot of ways, made me review certain behaviors. So although it is sad and it's obviously horrible that he's gone, there are sort of silver linings of it. And Star Wars is one of them. But I still appreciate your kind words.
Yeah. Thanks, man. And yeah, again, thanks for sharing that with us. That's incredible. That's why I love this so much. I love talking to people and hearing, because everybody's got something different, whether it's through the video games, through your parents, your older brother his girlfriend had a t-shirt on if he was lucky, you know. It's just so fun. And I enjoy sharing this with people and, building relationships about that and such. So when did you find out about the books and the comics and such? Like, when did that, you got back into it, the new movies came out, you're like, oh my God, what's going on? You're finding out, because that's kind of how I was in and out too the whole time. I'll be honest. And I mentioned that before. So this whole, like you said, Legends and expanding universe is so cool, learning about all that as well. But so you're back into it. So when did you start? Like, did you already know that books and comics were kind of a thing?
Yeah, I knew about them. I didn't realize how many. If you'd have asked me back in 2013, how many Star Wars books do you think there are? I'd gone 50, I guess, maybe. Probably one for each of the films and then a couple of spin-offs, maybe. And then comics, I had very little knowledge of. Comic wise, although I now have a podcast specifically about Star Wars comics, when I was younger, I used to read, there was a comic called The Beano in the UK. It's basically just like comic strips, but it's about certain characters. Like Dennis the Menace is a character who was created he came from the Beano. So that character, and there's loads of other, every issue had like different pages, and every page would be like, here's a character called Roger the Dodger, and he would just do lots of dodgy things. And Dennis the Menace would terrorize people. It's just very one note, but I used to read them a little bit. Then I just didn't read comics for ages. I read books a bit as a kid, but then again, video games took over, and then I just once I got into video games, that took up a huge amount of my time. I didn't really read as much. So when the canon reset and things, I didn't really know about canon. I didn't know about Legends, didn't know about the expanded universe. I didn't know that Heir to the Empire was basically considered the sequel to Return of the Jedi. I was just like, Return of the Jedi ends, and I was like, I get video games, and I know there's sort of, I knew sort of peripherally that there was Star Wars from Rogue Squadron and things. I knew there's like books about the X-Wing series and things like that. Yeah, so I knew a bit. But when when it all started, you know, The Force Awakens and all that sort of stuff came out, a good friend of mine called Alex, who's been on Genuine Chit-Chat a couple of times, he always gets me some really fun Star Wars themed gifts. In fact, one of the things behind me, where is it? Here it is. I'll show you, because YouTube is a lovely medium. He got me this, which is a Shadows of the Empire. It's the first issue of the comic. I'm never going to open it, but Boba Fett and IG 88, which is really cool. And he got me this, and he's got me some other random cool Star Wars stuff.
Yeah.
And he bought me Dr. Aphra #1, and he bought me the first one in 3 variants. And I was like, oh, cool, Star Wars comics. I knew vaguely about those, but I don't know that much about them. And so I was like, well, I read it once, and I was like, well, I read one of them, the least rare one, the least rare variant. And I was like, oh, this is quite cool. It's quite interesting. She's like a Indiana Jones, but the antithesis, the opposite. And it's in Star Wars. This is quite cool. So I bought issue #1 just as issue #1 non-variant. And I started reading that. So this is actually quite cool. I'm kind of getting into comics a bit more and things. And at this point, I still hadn't read much Marvel or DC comics. I'd maybe read the odd thing here and there, but not anything specific. And then in issue 7, I think, it does a crossover, the Screaming Citadel, with the main run of Star Wars. And I was like, fine, I'll get the main Star Wars comics. And then you read that, you know, then it goes further into Aphra, and you're like, oh, there's a connection with the Darth Vader comics, because obviously that's where she debuted. And it went on, and eventually I was like, I got to a point, and this was, it probably helps at the point where I was single at this time. So I had a lot of free time, a lot of free money, not necessarily free money, but I just wasn't spending money as much or going out or doing things. And so I was like, you know, I'm going to get all these Aphra comics. I'm going to get the Star Wars comics. I'm just going to read them before bed. I've kind of got out of reading. And it was around that time, I think it was just after around that time, I was like, you know, I'm going to get into the Star Wars books a little bit. You know, I want to be reading a bit more. I got the Aftermath trilogy, and I got the Ahsoka novel as well after watching the Clone Wars, because I did watch all the Clone Wars series years ago, not when it first came out. I think after it'd been cancelled, but before. It was when Rebels was on. I think Rebels series 1 or 2 was out, and I started watching Clone Wars at work on lunch breaks. So it took a while, but I did eventually get through it all. So it was around that time where everything just kind of fell together in a way, because my friend bought me these comics and all of the clever marketing, which is when you do crossover events. For a comic collector, it's a nuisance. But if you're getting into comics, it's a great way to just be like, fine, I'll buy everything. And then I just kind of made that decision. And I looked, because I was like, oh, the canon reset when Disney took over. Oh, it's only been active. Let me think. At that point, it was 2017. So I think it's before Genuine Chit-Chat. Just before, but it was around that sort of time. And so, yeah, I was like, oh, there's not actually that many comics. And I was like, I could probably afford these. So I went out and started buying them. And then I was like, if I just make an effort to keep up to date with all of the comics that are coming out, then it's so much easier than kind of going back. So that was kind of my way in. Dr. Aphra, because a friend of mine just was like, these variant covers of Aphra are really cool. You know, that spiraled me off to buying comics, and then pushed me more into reading the books and things, because I wanted to get a bit more weighted stuff in a sense. So yeah, as I said, the Aftermath trilogy and Ahsoka. And yeah, once I started my podcast, that was it. Once that happened, it was like, now I have an excuse. Now there's a reason.
That, you know, it's funny you say that, because I was never against comics or nothing, but I just never got into them. I didn't really have a local comic book shop. So now I'm kind of doing what you're doing, but backwards. I'm getting all the expanded universe kind of, now that Marvel's got the epic collections, they're making it a little easier. You know, the omnibuses are crazy expensive, and some of them, like, they're hard to get. So it it stinks for somebody that wants to get into it because it costs a lot of money. Now, like what you're doing, you're starting from the beginning. Well, you don't have that much, or there's not a far ahead, you know, you're not shooting for the stars, especially in the wallet book, you know. So is that kind of what made you, is this kind of what started this channel of yours? Is
Yeah, kind of. So I did when I was starting off with Genuine Chit Chat, because the nature of the show is basically interviewing people. I like to
right.
describe it as, you know, having conversations with people that I record, because interviews sound so formal. And I basically was doing a lot of collaborations. There was something that I don't think is a thing anymore called the Brit Pod scene, and it was put together by a couple of British podcasters. And it was just a collective to allow people to collaborate in a good space and that sort of thing. And so my Genuine Chit Chat got invited into that, as well as there's a gentleman named Frank Burton. He's been on Genuine Chit Chat a few times, and a podcast called Comics in Motion, which was a TV movie reviewing podcast to do with superhero stuff. It's Chris and Dave who did it, and Dave is a big comic book nerd, whereas Chris is a movie nerd. So they got together and kind of, you know, watched Superman and Batman, all these kind of things. Did one a week for a while, and I collaborated with them. They started Comics in Motion around the time I started Genuine Chit Chat, but they'd done a few podcasts before, and basically I did collaboration with them. We spoke about the Dread movie with Carl Urban, that I love, and from there we just stayed kind of connected, and I had them on my show a little bit later, and then they were like, oh mate, you like Star Wars quite a bit, and I was like, yeah, I do. I don't, at the time I didn't announce it to everyone, and now I do, and I wear it on my sleeve and literally have it on my skin, so it's kind of hard to avoid. And I'm wearing Star Wars clothing right now.
Yeah.
So,
it's very cool, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll show off my tattoos to your lovely viewers shortly as well. But basically, because they knew I knew about Star Wars and stuff, they're, oh, there's, you know, Mandalorian, and I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was season 2. I'm trying to think now. It basically, we agreed to do this special, like a collaboration special between myself, Chris and Dave, and then a guy called Scott Weatherly of the 20th Century Geek podcast, who I hadn't met prior. So we did 4 podcasts, one on basically each of our, or one for each person kind of. I tackled I did the prequels. We basically all rewatched all of the Star Wars movies in a lineup. I think I'm getting my wires crossed to a degree. So we did that as a collaborative thing because of Rise of Skywalker was coming out. There we go. So we watched all 8 movies plus the, you know, Solo and Rogue One, but we didn't really speak about Solo and Rogue One as much, I don't recall. But we basically watched all the movies again, and then during that I kept coming up with trivia, and they were like, you know a lot about Star Wars. And I was like, Wikipedia is a godsend. I was like, as soon as I have a question about something, I just go straight online and find it out.
Yep.
Exactly. And it's quite interesting. A little side tangent is with lightsaber construction for the Sith. When I started looking it up, it was around the time the canon was resetting. So I remember one day looking and it goes, oh, it's synthetic crystals. And then I looked another time and it was like, we don't know. And I was like,
yep.
I'm sorry, what? And then you check, like, you know, 2 years after that, it's like, oh, lightsaber crystal bleeding. And I was like, I'm sorry, what's happening? So when you, before canon, I was like, I thought it was this thing. I was telling all my friends, I was like, how cool is this? And they're like, we don't care. I was like, but cool, synthetic crystals. And then suddenly it's like, nope, nothing. Who knows? Who knows? It's all in the abyss. And then suddenly lightsaber bleeding. And none of my friends care about that either. But so we did these collaborations, and because of that, they basically were like, you know, you know a lot of stuff about Star Wars. And then I think they basically said, look, we're looking to expand Comics in Motion. We want it to be a show where a lot of creators can kind of trial things and create their own shows and just be an open space for nerds, vaguely to do with comics, just to kind of open it up. We've already got a platform. We've already got quite a few listeners and things. And so we'd want you to join it if you'd like to. And an idea for a show, would you be doing something to do with Star Wars? It doesn't have to be comics, but it can be anything really Star Wars-y. So I thought about it, and I was like, to be fair, I couldn't find that many shows about Star Wars comics. You know, there's a lot of shows that talk about Star Wars comics, but there's very few that focus in on them. And I was like, this is a really good opportunity for me to go all the way back, start from the start, and really look at everything under a magnifying glass. So because of them asking me in the collaboration and me just waffling on when people talk about Star Wars and then be like, I wonder why this. And I go, well, actually, there's a comic that does this. And there's now a running joke in Comics in Motion that if there's ever a plot hole in Star Wars, you have to check it with me to make sure it's not in a comic somewhere. So anytime on any of the podcasts that is even remotely related to Comics in Motion, if Star Wars gets mentioned, I will get mentioned now, which works quite good for a brand. But yeah, just because people ask me, to be honest with you, and I was umming and ahhing about it, but because I would have my podcast, Genuine Chit Chat, at that point for 2 or 3 years. and we were in COVID and things. And I was like, you know what, that's fine. Why not? Well, they asked me before that, but then I kind of started prepping things and working out when I'd be able to do it. And then when I kind of went to launch it, I'm pretty sure it was around sort of March time. So yeah, I did loads of research, loads of stuff building up to it. I've got this list somewhere in a box somewhere, which was just every canon comic that was out at that time. And then I drew myself a little timeline of just like, you know, before the Battle of Yavin, after the Battle of Yavin, trying to make sure I kind of drill it into my brain and all this stuff. And I just spent ages prepping. And then by the time I released it, COVID. So I managed to get so much reading under my belt and so many episodes. And yeah, so the short answer is because someone just asked me nicely.
I don't even know how to respond to that. That's incredible, you know. Well, and it's working great for you because you do a great job.
Thank you.
Sure. Is there a certain series or arc so far that you've read that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I'd say whenever people, we're in quite a few common Facebook groups to Star Wars. The only thing I use Facebook for anymore is the Star Wars groups that I'm in, and there's loads of lovely ones. The non-toxic Star Wars fan base, I want to say to everyone, go check that out. It's really good, really brilliant. Obviously, Star Wars Timeline as well, which Ben is the admin for and things, and obviously it's for his show. And there's Star Wars Book Nerds, the High Republic. There's loads of them. Go on Facebook, find a couple of them. They're really cool. And so on there, whenever someone mentions comics, I'm like, oh, I've got a pre-saved thing in my notes on my phone where I can just dive in and just copy and paste this thing of recommendations and then slyly, it's not so slyly, recommending to listen to my own show. The comics really, I'd say anything by Charles Soule is gold, really, in a lot of ways. But the best comic I'd say in canon Star Wars is the 2017 run of Darth Vader. It's written by Charles Soule. It's 25 issues, and it is set just after Revenge of the Sith. In fact, the first sort of scene in it is the scene after Vader yells out "No" in Revenge of the Sith, which is horrendous, really annoying. And because of that stupid scene, they then, you know, put it into bloody Return of the Jedi and ruin near perfect filmmaking. But not here to moan about that. But we get an extended version of that scene that after he says no and stuff, he force pushes Palpatine against the wall, and Palpatine gets up and he says, "Right, you're in a lot of pain. I get that. But if you touch me again, I will kill you." And I think he electrocutes him and stuff, you know, with the Force. And with that, I was like, whoa, this is, you know, hitting. It's kind of in the similar vein to, there's a book by, I think it's Matthew Stover, and he did the novelization of Revenge of the Sith. Yes. And then he did Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, which is like a sequel to Revenge of the Sith, written in the same style. The Charles Soule run is called Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, and it's meant to be a nod to those books. And so it shows Anakin's kind of struggle with being Vader straight after Revenge of the Sith, trying to become a Sith, getting his first lightsaber, bleeding a lightsaber, which is the main thing. And you get that within the first arc or so, which is Vader bleeding a lightsaber crystal is the most incredible thing I think I've seen in comic form. It's amazing. And, you know, with people who've seen Ahsoka and they're, oh my God, she's got white lightsabers, and Orla Jareni from the High Republic, she's got white lightsabers, and in Shadow of the Sith, there's a character that's mentioned that has a white lightsaber as well. So in the canon, there's these things about white lightsabers, but it's only explored in comics in two places. And one of them is the Darth Vader comics I've mentioned, 2017 run. And the other one is the Rise of Kylo Ren miniseries, also by Charles Soule. But the Darth Vader comics, the reason I think it's so good, the first volume is brilliant. Every volume's great, but it's just, you get to see Vader being badass like we all kind of want to see Vader. The Rogue One Vader, we get to see that, but we get to see him raw and fresh and finding himself. We get lightsaber bleeding. We get the fortress on Mustafar getting built, and there's like Sith artifacts that are possessed by ancient Sith lords and things. It's crazy. Oh, cool. And it's like all the experimental, weird, cool stuff that everyone goes on about it from Legends. A good percentage of that is in the canon. It's just in the comics, because for me, well, the way I kind of view the comics is the comic is the ideal space for experimentation, because in the general tier of things, movies sell the best, then live action shows, then animated shows, then books, then comics, then visual guides. So comics is kind of the space where it's like, hey, if you do a mini series and it doesn't sell that well, we don't lose loads of money. If we released Solo within 6 months of releasing Last Jedi, and everyone was really annoyed about Last Jedi, and it was quite divisive as a film, I personally love it, but I understand the division, and then it doesn't make loads of money, Disney are complaining they've lost millions. They give a bit of money to Marvel for, you know, a few things here and there, and then basically go, here you go, write a 4-issue series, we'll see how it goes. When you do that, and that's how Charles Soule started his kind of first few series or miniseries, when you do that, you just give these creatives such freedom to kind of do what they want. And because the audience for a lot of the Marvel comics are more teen, less so than all ages appropriate, which is a lot of what animation and the movies are. They get to be a bit darker. It's not quite Darth Bane dark, but it's getting closer to that element. You've got that vibe. So the 2017 Darth Vader comics, I say to everyone, just try that. And there's 25 of them. They're all on Marvel Unlimited. You can buy the omnibus and things.
Okay, I was going to ask because they're okay.
There's an omnibus. Yeah, it's the Vader Omnibus 2 because there's 3 sets of Vader runs. So there's a 2015 run by Jason Aaron, rather. That's set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Then you've got the 2017 run by Charles Soule. That's just after Revenge of the Sith. And then you've got the 2020 run by Greg Pak, and that's between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Okay. So 3 different runs, but 2017 Charles Soule one. That's the best one.
The golden one, huh?
Yeah, if you read that and don't like it, then Star Wars comics probably aren't for you.
And I just read the volume 2 of Tales of the Jedi. And because it's an epic collection, I got it. And it's nice, but it's a pain to try to hold that in bed at night. You got this big box here, and so I just read that, and it's funny how you say like the elements in the darkness. There's a lot of that back in the freedom, their creative freedom. There's a lot. It looks like Egyptian temples and all this artsy stuff. It's just I can't explain it that good. A friend of mine turned him on, the Revanchist. He's excellent. But it was just that free. You can't explain it to nobody, and I'm really enjoying the comics. So I've been kind of reading them in between as I get a few. I'm going to be starting Maul Lockdown. I love that book. It's awesome. I recommend that to anyone. Joe Schreiber is a great author. Fantastic. I just wanted to put that in there. But I'd have to check that out because them comics sounds really great. And
yeah, it's what the way I kind of explain, because the problem is with Star Wars, one of the things I love about it, and also one of the issues with it, is people are like, where do I start? With books and things, it's quite difficult. And when people say, I'm just like, okay, there's like, with books, there's like 5 places you could potentially start. High Republic's a good place, but also if you want to go to Legends, I think the Darth Bane trilogy is probably the best. Some of the best Star Wars content that exists, period, in or out of Legends or canon. It's phenomenal.
Yes.
But then the High Republic books, for me, I love them. But then I think the Aftermath trilogy is really good. But then it's like, it depends what one enjoys. Because if you like the X-Wing series and the Rogue Squadron books, then you're probably going to air more into the Alphabet Squadron books. There's lots of different places you can start. And everyone goes on about Thrawn as well. But with the comics, it's a bit more like up in the air. Because it's more... When you buy a book is like a movie. That's basically everything. If it's part of a series and you finish the book, that's fine. But with comics, you really have to get it's more of a continuous thing. It's like a series. And if you just watch 2 episodes of something and then stop, it's not the same as watching the first movie in a trilogy and stopping. They're 2 quite different feels. So what I say to people with comics is a place to start. Start with those Darth Vader ones, then move to the Darth Vader 2015 run, which obviously was released before, but is chronologically afterwards. So that's set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. You get to find out how Vader found out Luke's name. He works with Boba Fett a little bit. And then there's some sort of conspiracy where he kind of tries to undermine the Empire in some way. It's quite interesting. It's not the best comics in Star Wars, but they're good. And it introduces Dr. Aphra. And then that leads into when the 2015 run of Vader comics by Jason Aaron, when they stop, the Dr. Aphra solo series starts up, and it's a spiritual successor. The story continues directly on. It's by Jason Aaron for the first half, and Dr. Aphra's comics are they're the closest to Legends comics I'd say that exist, because they just have such crazy off-the-wall stuff. I mean, it's funny. Both runs, because the first run of Aphra's finished and it's been picked up by now Alyssa Wong, and that's basically all the second runs of things. Is basically the first run is usually between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and the second runs are usually between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which is the case for Aphra and also Star Wars. But the Aphra, it's so weird and bizarre because she's a rogue archaeologist. So she goes around and finds loads of weird, crazy artifacts. Some of them connect to the Sith. Some of them don't connect to the Sith and just weird stuff. There's one story arc, and I won't spoil it, but she comes across a mold that has slowly eaten the corpse of a Jedi and has become Force sensitive, but believes itself to be the Jedi. And that's just like one small part of a story arc. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Dr. Aphra goes completely bananas off the walls. You've got homicidal protocol droids that want to drain the blood of organics, and they look and talk like C-3PO, and you're like, this is crazy. And that's in the comics. So I just love the freedom. I love the weirdness. I think the comics, there's quite a lot of comics that are okay, but I haven't read any comics that are bad. But that's a general thing I recommend to people: is 2017 Vader, 2015 Vader, and then 2016 Dr. Aphra.
Awesome. Appreciate that. I definitely will get the Vader run going on. And yeah, we talk about legends and canon and the Disney side of things. And yeah, I'm in the middle of the road kind of guy. I've read the first few books in the High Republic, and I felt lost. You know, because as a fan, you want to read the comic books or the young adult books. It gets overwhelming, you know, to a point, and they kept kicking them out so fast.
100%.
So I kind of was like, oh, so, you know, I don't have that kind of jing to buy things that fast. Yeah. So, show that off one more time. That looked really nice.
Okay,
I want to see that.
They're not all here because two of them are downstairs being read at the moment. So my partner Megan's reading Light of the Jedi, which normally goes here. And then you've got Rising Storm, signed by Kevin Scott, Fallen Stars, signed by Claudia Gray. Downstairs I've got Convergence, signed by I forgot the woman's name, and I hugely apologize to the writer of Convergence. And then I've also got, there's the young adult novels, and then the junior novels, and then the blue ones there for the phase 2. But I've also got all the comics as well, all in my nice little comic bin down there. I've listed the audio drama. I've got so much of the High Republic stuff. I'm trying to get all of it. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
I've even got, these are the little, like the junior novels. So these are like so it's literally like, this is just a retelling of some of the stuff that happened in like the Rising Storm, but like a really abridged version for kids, basically. So if a kid's reading like the junior novel and they want to know why is this happening to this, instead of them reading like a really dark, intense tale about death and, you know, horror, you just read this little thing. And they're only a couple of quid. So I was like, you know, I'm going to get them, and eventually when I have kids, I'm basically figuring out ways to try and get the kids into Star Wars without overtly trying to be like, kids like Star Wars, because I know from a lot of friends, you try and push it, they will not listen. So I'm trying to just be like, every part, like, hey, let's just quietly put on Star Wars. I don't have kids, to clarify, and Megan's not pregnant, so it's a while off. But
there's the reveal on the channel here.
That would be good. That'd be clever.
Boom! It's a boy or a girl. It's a red lightsaber or blue. Yeah. But like, yeah, that's what I mean. As a fan, you want to have it all. So it just gets overwhelming in the waves and the series. But like, I'm not against it. I think I understand what they're trying to do with it. They're trying to create their own deal, and that's cool. I think Brotherhood was a fantastic novel. I like Chen, like probably the best out of all of them so far, in my opinion. That's just, there's a Master and Apprentice was great. Claudia Gray, I enjoyed that one. I even thought Padawan by
Kirsten White.
Yeah, there you go. I thought that was pretty good too.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that I'm not against any. I'm a fan.
Oh, no, of course.
I take it all in, and it is what it is. In a sense, No,
of course. There are some stories that are better or worse than other stories. Even with the High Republic, for example, I said to people, like, I think they're really good at something different. And the best thing about the High Republic is it's doing stuff that Legends could do. It's starting a story. Like, Darth Bane isn't connected with Anakin Skywalker or Darth Vader or anything like that. Like, it's not. It's its own story that happens to be in Star Wars. And that's what I like about, like the Jedi, Rising Storm, and Fallen Star. I think the adult novels are the best, and I, funnily enough, think that the young adult novels are the weakest. So just for phase 1, I think phase 2 I haven't read enough of to confirm yet, but phase 1, I think the adult novels are the best. Then the junior novels really surprised me. They're only meant for like 10 or 12-year-olds, but some of the characters and the stories in there are amazing. I was completely blown away. I'd bought one, just like, I'll give it a go. And then I read it, I was like, this is great. And then the young adult ones I think are good, but I think they do have, I describe it, and people who listen to my channel are probably sick of me saying it, I call it a lull. So it's just you get the first few chapters, like, I'm into this, but then you get, for all 3 young adult books, to be fair, I found there's probably 3 to 8 chapters in the middle. And I was just like, it just feels like everyone's vaguely wandering around and not really doing anything. It feels like they were told the book has to be 300 pages. And they were like, we've got 240 pages. And they're like, make it more. And it's like, I don't think they have, because I think the High Republic authors have thought about that a lot more, but it's just one of those things where that's how it felt. Whereas the junior novels are so small and compact, they're really quick, whereas the adult ones are massive, but there's so many characters and so much lore to it that it works. And to apologize to Zoraida Cordova, was the author of Convergence. Yes, so apologies to you for that. I knew it was Cordova because I remember because Eno Cordova's the Jedi Master character from the Fallen Order game. So I was like, I know it's Cordova something, but I didn't want to misspeak. But yeah,
very good. Are you reading one of them? Are you currently reading a High Republic novel?
Yeah, so with High Republic stuff being overwhelming, I agree and I love it. But like there's a 6-month gap between phase 1 and phase 2, and only in that gap did I manage to actually finish phase 1. So I try and read them as they come out because the phases are split into 3 waves, and with each wave is about 6 months. And in that you normally get an adult book, a junior novel, a young adult novel, one arc in the Marvel comics of Star Wars, one arc in the all ages High Republic Adventures, and then usually a mini series. That's in broad strokes how it kind of works. And then there's normally an audio drama thrown in there somewhere as well. So it genuinely took me until I think it was I was reading Midnight Horizon, which was the last book chronologically in phase 1 of the High Republic. I was reading that as Path of Deceit was delivered. So even me, who does Star Wars podcasting, who reads tons of Star Wars books, reads all the comics, does all this stuff, even I barely could keep up with it. I mean, at the moment we've got I know I haven't answered your question, which I will in a sec, but there's an audio drama coming out in a week or so it'll probably be out around the time of this release, and it's called The Battle of Jeddah, and it's set right after the adult book of phase 2 wave 1, which is called Convergence. And I'm only just this week starting Convergence, and the next wave is coming out in like a month. I think it's like March to May, around that sort of time is when the another sets of books are coming out. So it's like when people see my channel, I'm like, I release a book review like months after the books come out, because it's like I can't just commit to a Saturday to just sit down and read for 6 hours straight. I have to read when I go to bed and things. So yeah, at the moment I'm basically always reading a High Republic novel. I did read all the Legend stuff I've been reading, I've been listening to on audiobook. So I just bought myself like a year of Audible when it was on offer. And so I've listened to a lot of those. So normally I'm reading Star Wars comics for the podcast. Then I'm also reading new Star Wars comics when they kind of come out, because I get delivered out once a month. So I normally have an evening where I just set to myself, normally when I've just recorded my episode of the podcast, which is normally on a Thursday. So normally Thursday evening, myself and Megan, she goes to bed much earlier than I do because I'm a bit of a night owl. So we go to bed at like 10, and then I'm up reading till 1. And I've just got all these comics spread on my side of the room, and I'm just like reading through all those. So I'm normally reading through comics while also reading a High Republic book while listening to a Legends audiobook. So that's how much content, plus watching all the shows that come out and everything else. And I'm trying to fit video games into that. So yes, I am reading them.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's a lot of Star Wars activity happening over there in the UK. Yes, it is. How's the audio drama? How are you liking them?
Really, really enjoying them. I wasn't too sure about audiobooks because, like I'd say to people, I wouldn't recommend the High Republic audiobooks. Not because they're not well made. They're brilliantly made. All the Star Wars audiobooks have got music, sound effects, the voice actors they use. Mark Thompson's quite a common one, so is Jonathan Davis. They do some amazing voices. So it sounds like there's an all-star cast when it's just like one bloke in a soundboard, basically. Not to, not just he's not the one who does the sound effects, but I was just but I find with the High Republic, especially like the Jedi, there are so many characters all at once. It's so overwhelming that it's just really hard to follow. And when I was listening to the Rogue Squadron audiobook, it was a bit much because they talk about space battles. And I'm like, well, normally when I listen to audiobooks, I'm either driving to work or I'm doing chores or something. Normally it's laundry or washing up or something boring. So I am visualizing this thing. But when I'm trying to listen to someone basically explain how a ship is flying in space without a reference point, and how they are fighting someone else in space. Normally when you read a book, you can kind of go at your own pace and you can reread bits to kind of make sense. And with an audiobook, you can rewind or tap the back by 15 or 30 seconds button, but it's a little bit jarring at times. So I'd say for the Darth Bane books, audiobooks are amazing. It makes certain things feel more impactful, certain force powers that are used way more impactful. So I loved those. Shatterpoint I thought was great. Really good sound effects for that because a lot was in the jungle and whatnot. Darth Plagueis was incredible on audiobook. I loved that. And then the Rogue Squadron books, I found harder to follow because of space battles and things. But I am going to listen to the next one, which is Wedge's Gamble. But the one I finished today, because I had 15 minutes left, and I was like, I'm going to finish that before chatting with Stevie. I listened to Darth Maul Shadow Hunter. Now, the original one, they did an audio recording of that when it's around the time it came out by another gentleman whose name escapes me. But they recently, because they're doing the Essentials Legends collection, they have been, some of them have been re-recording, some of them have just been recording. But they re-recorded that with Sam Witwer, who voices Darth Maul, obviously, in Clone Wars and in Rebels. So you've got the actual voice actor for Darth Maul voicing Darth Maul and narrating things in an audiobook. And that audiobook, I only really listened because of Sam Witwer, because he's like my favorite person in Star Wars. And I was like, I'll give it a go, but it's a prequel. And I was like, I like the prequel films and stuff, but it was like when Brotherhood came out. I was like, I've got that physically. So I listened to that in audiobook rather. It's one of the few I listened to an audiobook as well. So whenever a prequel comes out, I'm always like, well, I know what happens to these characters, so it has to be really good. And Brotherhood, to be fair, is, and so is Master and Apprentice. But I was like, Darth Maul is like, I love Darth Maul in canon. This is Legend side. What are they going to do with him? I know it's held in high regard. I was blown away. I was like, it probably couldn't be better for a book that's a prequel about a character we know whose fate it is. It was done so well. So it's one of those things. I think I heard you say it in your podcast with Dylan, I think, which was when you start going back and reading a lot of these Legends things, you do kind of start to understand some of the gripes that some of the Legends people have, the Legends fans. I do contest and would debate some points that often gets raised with them, but I will concede that it's pretty hard to argue when I think Darth Bane is the best trilogy that exists, and Darth Bane is just phenomenal. I know that's some of the top tier of Star Wars Legends, but there's just parts of Legends that kind of come through which I just feel like they did have a freedom to them, and I'm hopeful for the future of Disney with their canon because of things like Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher. That felt, which is it's up here, that felt like a Legends novel. This one, which is about it really did, and that's what I like about it. And that's I think when they're now letting people be a bit more free, which is what I think they need to do. But audiobook wise, I'd say if you can listen to audiobooks and do other stuff and you can pay attention, do it. But I would say err on the side of caution with the High Republic, because there's so many characters, and even reading the book, I had to reread parts, especially like the Jedi, because there's just so many. Whereas listening to an audiobook, it's like, sorry, who's doing what now? Have you listened to many?
I tried. The first one I listened to was Kenobi, and that was because I wanted to. I never read it before.
Yeah, I haven't either.
The series was coming out, so I got a free trial, tried it at work, and it made me not like. I didn't listen to the whole thing. I stopped and got my credit back because I'm like, I don't like this, and they gave me my credit back. I read the book and loved it. It's great. John Jackson Miller did a fantastic job with that book. It's a great story. So audiobooks for me, I can't do it. I can't do that. I just
totally understand that.
I'm a little jealous of you guys that can, because I heard that Sam Witwer did a great job with Shadowhunter. I just finished reading that, by the way, so I'd like to get your thoughts.
Oh wow, that's a good coincidence. Yeah. I'm glad I finished it today. Then I had a weird feeling. I was like, I feel like I should just finish it today rather than listening to music on the way home. But I will, because we've mentioned Sam Witwer a couple of times, and I keep teasing your listeners, so I'll show off my tattoos and then I can stop, because otherwise we'll finish the podcast and then I'll be filled with regret that I haven't showed. So I've only got 2 Star Wars tattoos at the moment. I'm going to be doing a sleeve. So obviously my audio is going to go off a little bit because I'm going to be far from the mic. But so there's the main 2. So let's move this out of the way a bit and hit everything while I do it. So
look at that.
That's one of them. So obviously that's the cover of Force Unleashed. That's like a stormtrooper, stormtrooper helmet and a blaster and things like that. So that is Sam Witwer, basically. And then the other one,
detail.
Thank you. It took a lot of time. And then that one's my other one. It's obviously Darth Vader and Obi-Wan and Anakin. That was my first one. That was 7.5 hours straight. And then this one was 3 sessions of 4 to 6 hours each. So it was quite a while of me under the gun, as it were. And the only reason I haven't got more is partly because I'm trying to work out which one next to get. I think I'm going to get a Kanan tattoo because he's my favorite character in all of Star Wars. And then Ahsoka's pretty close as well. It's Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Kanan are my favorites. But Kanan, there's probably not going to be much more Kanan stuff. So I was like, okay, I can get that. Whereas with Ahsoka, I was like, well, they're bringing out an Ahsoka series. And what I don't want to do is get an Ahsoka tattoo. And then if the series sucks, which I hope isn't, because you know I have faith and I love Rosario Dawson and Ahsoka, so I have faith. But I'm just like, it's like if I say to people, it's like, if you're ever going to get a tattoo of musical artist, wait till they die and give it a few years. Then if there's no controversy, then get them tattooed on you, because you don't want to get a person tattooed on you and then it comes out that they're a monster or something. So yeah, that's a little long-winded thing of my half tattoo sleeve.
No, them look great, man. Yeah, I love the detail. I wanted other listeners and watchers watchers to check them out, because they're good. You showed them off before. So, but back to the audiobook thing. Yeah, I'm jealous of you guys that can do that, especially for Shatterpoint, because I really love that novel and I heard it was really good. Or even Dooku Jedi Lost by Kevin Scott, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I heard that was like epic, and I can't do it. So,
and that's the thing, because with Tempest Runner, which is an audio drama in Phase 1 of the High Republic, Dooku Jedi Lost, which has a lot of High Republic connections, and then Battle of Jeddah, all of those, when they release, that's the only High Republic books I don't have is the scripts of the audio drama, because they don't release it as a book. They release it as the script. So you're reading it like it's a script. And I glanced through Tempest Runner when I was in a bookstore, and I was like, I'm so glad I can listen to audiobooks, because reading this as a script really is not the same as reading it as an actual book. So I'm tempted to buy Tempest Runner just to kind of have my collection. But yeah, I do feel bad, because reading the scripts must be a little bit jarring, kind of you can't absorb yourself in the same way.
Yeah, I had to go back and reread a couple things here and there, and then I was just trying to play the character in my head, so then it even took me longer, and it's like, that's not my forte, I can't be making different voices in my head, and what's your favorite time to read, by the way? Like, are you just a night reader?
Mainly nighttime. If I get some time to myself, is a lot of it, but it's usually, fortunately, because Megan and I do a lot together, so pretty much every TV show we watch together. Really, we normally basically just say, right, I don't want to. She loves watching the Great British Bake Off and RuPaul's Drag Race, which I don't mind either of those things. Whereas I love watching Star Wars and Marvel and some of the big sort of epic things. Similar with movies, I want to watch all these big, I want to watch like The Departed and Gangs of New York and all these big epic films. And she wants to watch, Finding Nemo for the 50th time and Monsters Inc. again. It's that sort of thing. And so she has a hard day at work. She's a teacher, so she gets back and she's just like, oh, I just want to chill out and not have to think. And I'm the opposite. I get back from work. I work in insurance, and I'm like, I just want to escape out of the boring bureaucracy of modern life, and I want to delve into something where I'd have to think about all that stuff, which is why I like Star Wars so much. So almost everything we watch together. So all the Star Wars and stuff she watches with me. But when I get the time to myself, if she goes to bed, usually early, I used to be like, no, stay up with me, and now I'm like, if you want to go to bed early, you can, because then I got 2.5 hours to myself. I mean, I've been playing Star Wars Squadrons recently. I've had it for like a year, but I haven't managed to. But yeah, in the evenings, that's the time where I do most of my reading. I do quite a lot of my comic stuff there. With comics, is normally lunch breaks at work, because then I make notes and stuff, and then I record when I work from home on Thursday on my lunch break. So it's kind of like a routine. But with normal general reading, I really like it before bed, because I also find that I've never really had much trouble sleeping, but I always find I sleep much quicker when I'm reading. And I think it's because especially when you're into a book, you're basically reading until your eyes hurt, and your whole body's saying, you need to stop. You can't focus on words anymore. Ease up. And so you do that, and then you basically flick the light off, put your head down, and you're gone. Whereas sometimes I find that if you try and go to bed without reading, I end up just thinking about Star Wars, and then it keeps me up. It has the opposite effect.
There goes the nightlight. You got the book again. Yeah.
What about yourself? Do you have like a preference for reading?
I read the longest in the morning when I first get up, make a cup of coffee,
So before the family wakes up and things.
Yeah. But at nighttime, I love reading before I go to bed. And I can't tell you how many times I had to wake up and try to put the book back away and put the bookmark in it, because you're right. It puts you in that like meditative state where you're just, and that's it. And I tried to tell my wife, I'm like, you should read more before you go to bed. You'll sleep a lot better, because somebody, she runs a lot, so and exercises. So I'm like, read, you'll sleep better, you'll feel better in the morning. No, and then she does it, and then she's like, oh my god, I slept so great. Like, well, yeah,
the same to Megan.
Yeah,
the exact same. And I want to say your bookmark, by the way, there's I think a wood burnt laser cut lightsaber bookmark that you've got. I love it. I just want you
Yes.
to know that. I need to shout that out to you that you've just got
Thank
one of
you.
the coolest bookmarks around.
Yeah, that's Luke Skywalker. You can get them on Amazon. If there was some person or a company that was making them, they had Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, a dual
Oh,
Ahsoka
nice.
bookmark. Yeah, it was really, really cool looking. But unfortunately, I still have it on the shelf, but my cat got a hold of it some more, and now it kind of broke. So I was going to try to glue it together, but
Yeah, I'm
it's
not letting my dog near any of my Star Wars stuff.
Mm.
Whenever I read, I never take my comics down because sometimes if I go downstairs to read, sometimes I read in bed, but sometimes if it's quite early and I'm quite hot, I'll be like, oh, I'll go downstairs, get the dog out of her bed and things, and she can just kind of cuddle with me on the sofa. And if I read a book, it's fine. She doesn't pay much notice. But if I read comics, she's like, oh, that looks like something fun I can destroy. And I'm like, I just refuse to read comics around her because I'm like, if you touch this variant edition, or if you touch High Republic #1, I'll kill you. Not literally, but I'll be very sad about it. And it'll be my fault because she's a dog and doesn't understand the concept of ownership or comics. So
I know it.
Completely on me.
And especially some of them that are expensive. I mean, you spend money on them. That's why I kind of built a room, real quick just to kind of put my stuff in so nobody could,
Genius. We got the same idea. This is a converted loft.
Perfect. It works. It's working so far. Except sometimes the cats will try to come in the door and they'll be pounding. It's like, oh my goodness sakes, stop. I'm sorry. But yeah, I like reading in the morning the best. The cup of coffee. There's nothing like it. It's quiet. I'm not one of them guys that can do multitask while reading. I don't know how some people can do that or read multiple books throughout the day. It's like, well, that's really. Tell me how you do it.
Tell us both. I can listen to an audiobook because that's separate for me. I've got kind of audio's kind of legend stuff, and then reading's kind of High Republic stuff, and then a few things in between. But yeah, so I don't get when people can pick up numerous books at once, especially if they're all similar genre as well. I even struggled like in 22. I know you've seen it, but I haven't watched Lord of the Rings: Rings of Power yet.
Yep.
And I love Lord of the Rings. I've got all the extended editions of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings on Blu-ray. Incredible. But it came out at the exact same time as House of the Dragon. And so I was like, I just watched one and then I'll watch the other. But I was like, basically two shows in existing universes, but with completely new characters. And as a standard, House of the Dragon fashion and not dissimilar to to Lord of the Rings, you always get a handful of characters that will sound exactly the same.
Right.
And it's like trying to wrap my head around these whole new host of characters is one thing, but trying to watch two current fantasy shows that are set in very important book-driven universes with huge amounts of lore, I'm just like, no, I need one and then the other.
I have not seen the House of Dragons, but I've watched the Lord of the Rings because I love Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I love it. It's I think it's got one of the best soundtracks ever. 100%. And nothing against Star Wars, and I love John Williams and everything he's brought for us too, of course. But like, there's just something about the Lord of the Rings music. It's very unique.
I agree. I mean, I'd argue that I love Star Wars to my dearest heart. I like Star Wars more than Lord of the Rings, but I would argue that the Lord of the Rings trilogy, theatrical or extended, I'd argue that's the best trilogy in existence. Now, I love the original trilogy. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just like, objectively, I feel like the original trilogy, there are holes you can poke. Whereas I think every time you watch Lord of the Rings, and if you try and find things to pick, you just find even better things. And so I'm just like, I can basically not fault Lord of the Rings in any way apart from, Fellowship's a little bit slow, but that's it. I don't think it's slow. Just because it's so much lore in it, people can get turned off by it a little bit. But I just think that Lord of the Rings trilogy is the best film trilogy that exists, even though my favorite is Star Wars.
Yeah, that's a good conversation. I never really thought about. I think to me, the original trilogy is the best. It just brings me when I was a kid. It made me feel safe. It's something that I held dear to my heart. Luke was, he was every childhood hero. You know what I mean? And it just, but yeah, I never really thought of it. So there's a conversation for a whole other time.
100%.
There's a lot of them I've kind of notated in my head. It's like, well, we can talk about that way more. So that's, oh man, you just got me on that.
So I got you with Lord of the Rings. I said, one of your other favorite franchises. Now it's like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to lead into that. Is there any other fandoms that you're really into? And besides, now Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, so I'm more or less I'm into kind of most things. There's very few things I'm not into in some degree. So I'm up to date with all the MCU stuff. So I've seen all the movies. I watched all of them as they're coming out in the cinema since watching Iron Man 1 actually in the cinema. I've seen all the series on Disney Plus for the MCU stuff. It's a mixed bag, but I think even the worst one is still passable. But I quite controversial with my likes in the MCU stuff because I really love She-Hulk and I think everyone else seems to hate it and I don't quite know why. But I love the MCU stuff and Marvel, and I've read a few Marvel comics, but once again I got into that from the video games. I used to love the Spider-Man games on the PlayStation 1, the classic where you're running on a rooftop and it's just you can't walk on the ground because there's fog. It's like, you developers couldn't make a Spider-Man game with the amount of mechanics you've put in this. You just had to limit to the rooftops because you've realized you've bitten off more than you can chew. I loved that. And then, you know, Ultimate Spider-Man comes out on PS2 and that's phenomenal. And now we've got like Spider-Man on PS4 and it's like, oh my God, what a fun game. DC stuff. I've always liked DC. I've read quite a few Batman sort of comics and things. And I've seen most of the DC stuff, but recently I've just kind of... it's lost me a little bit. I've not seen Black Adam. I've not watched any of the DC series, so I didn't watch any of the Arrowverse. I haven't watched Peacemaker. I have no intention of watching the Penguin series. But like I saw the Matt Reeves Batman. It was phenomenal. So I want to watch more of that. But yeah, for me, I'm just like, DC are already at a disadvantage, unfortunately, because I have no interest in Shazam either because I watched the first one. I wasn't a fan, but I'm just like, I haven't got a problem with DC. But the thing is, with Marvel now, it's like, well, I've basically seen everything, so all I need to do is that thing we talked about before. I just need to keep up with Marvel. Yeah, right. Whereas with DC is a little bit of catching up, and Megan actively doesn't like DC. We've watched lots of the films, and even the best one, she's like, yeah, I don't like it. She's like, The Dark Knight is the best DC film, and I love Birds of Prey as well, the Harley Quinn movie, but even she was like, I love the Batman films, but I don't actually like Batman as a character very much. So I'm not really that interested. So it's one of those things where it's like, she isn't that fast. I like them and I want to keep watch them up to date. But for me, it's Marvel and Star Wars. I do want to watch like Lord of the Rings, but there's a few other sort of bits and pieces that float around. But I think Star Wars and Marvel are my main two, really, which are both owned by Disney. So I'm just such a shill.
Yeah. It's kind of nice having Disney Plus and having all that at your fingertips. I'll be honest, because I just recently finished the 2003 Clone Wars because I never seen that before because I was in and out of the fan, and I loved it. I thought it was just great. Really cool. And yeah, I couldn't imagine watching them in little 2-minute clips or 3-minute segments between, you know, a commercial or something, and then back to the other show. Yeah, I couldn't grasp that. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I like Star Wars is my numero uno, you know, and then now I've become a really big fan of the Marvel side of things. Besides Lord of the Rings, I'm not heavily into that. I know there's a fandom out there where they do their thing, and that's cool, you know. But I'm not. Star Wars is enough for me to try to keep up with for sure, especially with a family and a wife and 4 pets, and you know, it's a lot.
Yeah, you've got like almost different lives, haven't you? You've got the working life, which is kind of what you have to do. Then you've got kind of the family life, which is what kind of makes you happy and fulfills you. And at the end of the day, it kind of puts a smile on your face. Then you've got your own personal little life, your own sort of nerdy one, and obviously your content creator. So you've got your YouTube life as well as your Star Wars life and things. And I've, you know, got a very similar thing to that. And it's kind of just like making time for all these things. And it's like when I was younger, I was like, you know, I love socializing and seeing people, being an extrovert and things. And as I'm getting older, I'm like, I just quite like having a night in with my books. I like seeing people, but I like books now a lot more than I used to. It used to be like, go out 3 or 4 times a night, not necessarily get drunk or anything, just see different people 4 nights a week, big social events, this sort of stuff. And now I'm like, I've got a gig I have to go to. It's like, it's one of your favorite bands and you want to go. You're excited to buy the tickets. Yeah, but now it's come down to it. I just want to stay in bed.
I'm kind of tired. Hungry.
Yeah, wear a blanket, you know. Yeah. So I get you.
Yeah. Trisha and I, I watched The Bachelor with her. I'm not afraid. She's got me into that. She watches Star Wars with me, and you know, she's into Mando, and now we're starting to kind of do a little thing on here for Mando 3 coming up. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Why not? You know,
amazing.
Yeah, you know, something fun to do. I know you do watch parties and reviews and such of the TV series. Are you excited for Mando 3?
Oh yeah, very much so. So with me, one of the things we've done on Comics in Motion, and I normally put them on my YouTube channel as well, so they've got video too, is weekly discussion shows. I think a lot of Star Wars podcasters do it. And when I remember when Andor was the 3-episode premiere, and everyone in the entirety of the Star Wars fandom online and things, including like even Alex and Molly of Star Wars Explained, which are some of the biggest Star Wars content creators, and I've had them on Genuine Chit-Chat. Actually, they're
I
delightful people.
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Thank you. So with everyone collectively went, like, cause all released on like a Wednesday, or it might have even been a Friday at that point. But it was like, here's loads of Andor. It's every episode's 40 minutes, and there's 3 of them in one go. And all of us who all had already mentioned on social media, we'll do a weekly discussion show with Andor. And they're like, oh, it's going to be 3 episodes, and it's later than normal. It's on I think it was on a Friday or something. And everyone, it was just like, we had it planned to watch Andor on the Wednesday and get it recorded stuff. How are we going to fit this in? So with weekly discussions, I always have that kind of humorous idea. But yeah, with Mandalorian, and what I'm going to be doing each year, I try to widen the guests a bit more. So I try not to have just the same people constantly, because as much as I love talking to them, I'm trying to widen the horizons. So you may get a message from me coming knocking and seeing if we can organize something. And there's a couple of other Star Wars individuals I've been collaborating with too. So I try to widen, you know, I just want to talk to as many people as possible about Star Wars. And I love hearing different perspectives. It's kind of one of the angles from your show, isn't it? Is like, everyone's come from a different place. So everyone likes slightly different things about Star Wars. But because you like Star Wars in general, you can basically talk about any aspect of it. And I just love it. Yeah. But sorry, I didn't ask you a question. I just spoke about myself and I'm very excited. Very excited for Mandalorian.
I'll answer the call. As long as it's not like on a Tuesday at 11 p.m. my time, where it's like,
no, it would be.
I'm sleeping by 7.
Of course, it would be very similar to this sort of time. I'd organise with you, but I would just jump it on you. But I'm going to orchestrate a few things. But I am excited for Mandalorian. I am excited about it, and I really liked Mandalorian. I thought Mandalorian Series 1 was good, but I thought Mandalorian Series 2 was fantastic. Now, for me, I think Andor is probably the best Star Wars show, but I think that as much as I love Mandalorian, and I know that this is going to make you happy, I think I enjoyed Kenobi more than Mandalorian. Now, the Kenobi show, that is, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Although I think it's probably a worse show, I think it's probably objectively, there's just some parts, and you're like, did no one watch this? Like the whole coat thing, I know it always gets brought up, but I'm just like, how of everything in Star Wars, you could have think of 100 possible other things, and it just felt like you'd not written anything in the script, and it got to filming day and you're like, grab a big coat. But aside from that, you know, I did really enjoy the Kenobi series. It hit home with me. Kenobi's one of my favorite characters on Star Wars. Ewan McGregor especially, you know, I was going to love that because it's kind of, that show was almost for the prequel fans. So but for me, it's like Andor is top for me. That's I'd say that's probably the best Star Wars show kind of made at the moment. But then for live action, I think probably Kenobi and then Mandalorian. But I love where Mandalorian's kind of going. We're going into a place we haven't seen much before, because my issue with Mandalorian was more so the episodic things, which is a bit more like Clone Wars. I know Clones was kind of more arcs, but it was more so like, here's a one-off episode with a monster of the week or something. And I like it. It's fun to watch, but there's nothing that necessarily grips me to watch the next episode. Whereas Kenobi, because we knew this is an event, at the end of every episode, I was like, I want to watch the next one. And with Andor, I was a little bit more like that. And although Andor, I think, is probably one of the best Star Wars shows, my actual pure favorite, and in my opinion, the best Star Wars content that exists outside of the original trilogy is Star Wars Rebels. So for me, I'm like, yeah, I'm excited for Mandalorian and I'm excited for these sort of things. But it's like, for me, Rebels. So I think I'm more hyped for the Ahsoka show. Okay. But I am very excited for Mandalorian. But I know I've heard you speak about them in brief kind of in the past, but how do you rank the live action shows and then by proxy kind of the animated ones?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I haven't really gave my perspective on it through certain, you know, other YouTubers I've commented here and there on the shows. I really like the Kenobi show. I'm a big fan of it. I think there's moments, like you said, the coat thing gets brought up, the whole Reva thing, you know, getting stabbed by Vader, you know, twice, and then, you know, still rocking and rolling. Yes, it missed on a lot of areas where, in my opinion, that should have been the most money should have been thrown at that show, or talent, if you will, not taking nothing away from Deborah Chow, because I think she's good. We don't know the whole story behind that show either. I mean, the COVID was happening there, you know, who knows the volume. It did feel a bit claustrophobic, like they say, you know. Andor, I didn't like it. I don't like it. It just didn't feel like Star Wars to me. And especially the way that the world has been the last few years all over. I wanted something fun and exciting to take, like you said, you mentioned before, to take you out of, hey, I'm an insurance guy. I don't want to do this. You know what I mean? I want to go somewhere in a galaxy far, far away. And they had a great opportunity to try to do that with maybe some of the other shows, or even and they canceled the Rogue Squadron movie. Why don't you try a show about X-Wings in space and battles and such? That would have been kind of cool. You know, in my opinion, that would have been kind of fun and exciting. So Andor didn't hit it for me. I understand why some people like it. I totally get that. And that is cool. I dig that. That's their vibe. They like that kind of darkish suspense thriller, you know. The Book of Boba Fett I thought was good too. I thought that was really well. I mean, it had its moments. Mando season 2.5, everyone says, which them episodes were great. You can't knock them at all.
They were better than, I'd argue. I even said to people, I think, although the Ahsoka episode of Mandalorian Series 2 is probably my standout, because obviously I love Ahsoka and I love Rosario Dawson before she was Ahsoka and anything. With Mando Series 2, I was like, it's a good show, really fun, but really it's the finale and the Ahsoka episodes that stand out. The rest of it, not as much. But then with Book of Boba Fett, I was like, these two Mandalorian episodes are probably better than almost all the Mandalorian episodes we've had. And so I was in that weird phase. I was like, I'm mad because you've just stopped Book of Boba Fett to start Mando.
Yeah.
But there's also some of the best Mandalorian content and probably some of the best Star Wars. That one episode, I think it's episode 5, where it's just all Mando and he's getting his new ship.
Yep.
It was phenomenal. I was like, this is incredible. And then I was like, oh, back to Boba Fett. And I was like, why have you done that to me? It's like you've given me like
a little teaser.
Like, it's like you give me a bit of fruit and I've taken a couple of bites. And I'm like, okay, I'm okay with eating this banana. I fancy a chocolate bar. And then you come in and go, here's your favorite chocolate bar in the world. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I eat like half of it. And they go, nope, here's your banana again. And I'm like, okay. And that was kind of the finale. And I was like, do you want me to eat a banana or a chocolate bar? Because you were sending me mixed signals here. Yeah. Why did they not do like what Marvel started doing, or at least on Disney Plus, feature presentation? Yeah. They should have done Book of Boba Fett, done the 5 episodes, and then in the 5th episode, Mando just shows up. Ignore Grogu; he wasn't in there. Just have Mando show up, then him kind of say to Pilo Motti, or whatever her name is, played by Amy Sedaris. I think it's Pilo Motto or Motti or something.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's kind of a different last name. Yeah.
All he'd need to do is go to her at the end of Book of Boba Fett, which would be episode 5, say I need a ship or something, and then it ends. And then it says, watch out for a special episode. And then at like Christmas or between Christmas and New Year, release a 2-hour-long feature presentation, which has got those 2 Mandalorian episodes in it. And it's just called like, I don't know what they call it, just The Mandalorian or something. And then just be like, here's a special thing. Release that as a separate thing. You've teased it in the Book of Boba Fett. You've put it out as its own thing. Then you've got kind of a breather between Book of Boba Fett and Mando Series 3. But instead, I've got friends of mine who only really watch live action Star Wars. They're not into the animated stuff or books or anything like that, which is completely fair. And they all pretty much unanimously gave up on Book of Boba Fett around episode 3. Now, I think Boba Fett is a good show. I think it's disjointed and they didn't know quite what they were kind of doing in certain points. They were like, it kind of felt like half a show and then a separate half a show.
Right.
But I just feel like it was good and I enjoyed it. But so many people have said to them, right, if you're not going to watch any more Book of Boba Fett, that's fine. Just watch episodes 5 and 6 because Mandalorian Series 3 is not going to make any sense. And it's not just, and I can't tell them why, because if you tell them why, it spoils the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the book, I really like the Tusken side of things. I wanted to touch on some of that, but jumping back to finish the Book of Boba Fett, you're pretty spot on with that answer. But like, I thought the Tusken, the feature in there and seeing their culture,
loved
and that backstory was cool. Like there was nothing like that, man. Like I liked that kind of vibe that it gave. They did their best with Robert. I believe it was Robert Rodriguez that directed that. I thought he did a good job. I mean, I liked it. What else do we got here? We talked about Kenobi, Andor, Mando. I loved them. I thought they were great. Season 2 was my favorite. I'm excited for season 3. I don't know what's going to happen. I try not to see or look at any spoilers or really listen to a lot of other YouTubers and their thoughts. Because right away, as soon as a trailer comes out, they're like, oh, did you see in the background underneath the rock in the back on the left by the boot? There's a lightsaber back there. And you know whose that was? That was Mace Windu shit, man. Oh, I didn't mean to swear. I'm trying not to swear, but you know what I'm saying? Like, they just take it to a whole other level, which is cool because it shows the excitement. But like, you know, sometimes they're right, and I don't want to know.
Completely. I'm the same. I normally, my rule of thumb with Star Wars and Marvel stuff is I watch the first trailer, because if I don't, I just see about 1 billion screenshots of it throughout my social media feeds. And then I generally avoid follow-ups. I don't watch, some people watch, there's normally 2 trailers, where there's sometimes there's a teaser, then 2 trailers, then 3 TV spots that are made up from the other trailer footage, but with the little bits put in there.
Yeah.
Plus there's behind the scenes stuff. And I'm just like, no, this is all too much. I want to just, the trailer, then the whole thing, then afterwards. And I would say with you swearing, funnily enough, on Genuine Chit-Chat, I swear quite a fair amount, but on Comics and Canon, I generally don't. But in Star Wars, obviously, they don't swear, apart from in Andor, where you got the one thing. You got the guy in Andor, one of the last episodes, and he said. So that could be your one. And also, it's still PG, because all of the Marvel stuff, which is all like PG-13 or 12A over here, they all say it. At least, like, now, in the early ones, you'd get 1 or 2. Now you get like 5 or 6, you know, so I wouldn't worry too much. But I've been, with my Star Wars content, I'm trying to make it okay for all ages as well. But sometimes I mean my editing, because I'm by myself when I'm recording. And then sometimes I say something, I'm like, I can't say that. Right, get rid of the C-bomb, get rid of the F-bomb. I can't say those for Star Wars pod. So sorry.
No. So, you know, I try not to get heavily involved. I'll watch the trailers, but I don't want to see everybody's reaction and such, 100%. Or listen to it. And then everybody, that's a continuous thing people talk about throughout, which is cool. I love that everybody gets excited, basically.
May I ask you, with the animated shows, I seem to recall that you hadn't seen Resistance, so which is good. Continue doing that. I don't think Resistance is even worth watching, to be blunt. Sorry to the creators who made it. I know people worked hard. It's pretty rough. Yeah, I'd say it's as rough as the 2007 Clone Wars movie, which I consider to be probably the only piece of Star Wars content that I would say is bad. Now, I know Dave Filoni tried his best, and I'm sure there's lots of people like the Clone Wars movie. I think it's bad, and Megan has specifically said, she was like, I'll watch lots of Star Wars with you again. I'm never watching the Clone Wars movie ever again. She was like, if we have kids and they want to watch Clone Wars, I'm not watching that movie. It's like, she's like, I'd rather watch, you know, Anakin's terrible dialogue in Attack of the Clones or Jar Jar in Phantom Menace. I'd much rather any of those things by a long shot than watching the Clone Wars movie. And I'd say, for me, although I like Clone Wars, I think Clone Wars is fantastic, but season 1 of Clone Wars is the weakest. I'd say it took them a little while to find their footing. Although there are some incredible episodes in season 1, but there's a lot of filler. But I think that Resistance, unfortunately, is just worse than pretty much all of season 1 of Clone Wars. And it's like, that's quite a hard sell. And if I'm trying to get people into Star Wars, and like, what Star Wars should I watch? It's like, not Resistance, because you watch Resistance. Resistance, unfortunately, is exactly what, when everyone was worried about what is Star Wars going to become when Disney take over, and a lot of us who are more optimistic are like, they're just going to do what they do with Marvel, pump money into it and hope for the best. And then a lot of people are like, oh, it's going to be all PG-13 and silly, and they're taking the edge off. You watch Resistance, it's like, oof, this is unfortunately a lot of the issues that people, especially the EU fans, have for modern Star Wars, and the payoffs that you get. Series 2 is way better than Series 1, to be fair, but the best episodes in Resistance don't even match the middle ground episodes of Clone Wars, Bad Batch, or Rebels, in my opinion. But so you're not missing out. But please tell me your rankings of Clone Wars and Rebels and Bad Batch and stuff.
Well, I like Bad Batch a lot. Clone Wars, now that I just recently watched in 2003, like I was really impressed. Like I should have did a reaction video, because I mean I was in the kitchen. I was I don't know what I was doing, helping cook something, but I have it on a tablet. I'm watching. And like the flour went everywhere, and you know, it was some epic battles, especially with Mace Windu. I really like Mace Windu too; he's cool. So that's up there. And then I would probably say the Bad Batch. I don't know, Rebels is really good too. I liked Rebels. I thought they did a fantastic job with that show. Kanan Jarrus is cool. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, it is what it is now. But I mean, his whole vibe was really cool. I really got into that. The 07 Clone Wars, I mean, it has its moments. Like, there's a lot of filler stuff in there. I mean, that ran for 7 seasons. That's a long time for an animated show, besides Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z and that whole program.
I also love.
Yeah, I do too. So, yeah, I mean, right now, I'm not really vibing that, like, season 2 of the Bad Batch. I mean, this last episode was pretty good. I really, the tribe was good, but it was kind of felt like it was a slow start to me so far, you know. So I'd have to say the 03 Clone Wars is top of the list at the moment. You know,
Nice. It's very different as well.
Yeah.
It's not like anything else.
No.
And I just
Yeah.
think Grievous in that was just insane.
Dude. Yes. I couldn't, he was all just, he was really evil, like, too, like, even a lot more. It was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And it's one of those things where the Bad Batch, I know Ben of Star Wars Timeline, third shout out now. I think he thinks that for him, Bad Batch is amidst the best. He was blown away. He thinks, I think that's his favorite animated show now, which is completely fair. You know, it's a good show. And obviously although I prompted the question to a degree, it's an unfair comparison because we're about a third through series 2 of Bad Batch, whereas obviously Rebels is finished with 4 seasons, Clone Wars is finished with 7 seasons, and Resistance is finished with 2 seasons. But with Bad Batch, I am enjoying it. But I was saying this to Megan when we talked about it yesterday. Like I'm fine to watch the episodes, and there are some moments like, oh, this is really cool, but I don't have that thing that when an episode ends, I'm desperate to watch the next one. Right. I got it more with Mandalorian. Obviously, I had a lot of Kenobi, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of Ahsoka, and especially with Mando Series 3. But it was one of those things where with certain episodes of Rebels, I was like, I literally have to watch the next episode to see what's happening, because although the episodes they're not quite like arcs like Clone Wars. They're kind of, it is a continuous story, but there's kind of threads between. There's certain moments in Rebels, and I was like, I have to watch the next episode right now. Whereas Bad Batch, I'm like, this is really cool. Yeah. I'm really enjoying this. If someone said to me, look, sorry, Mike, you have to wait 6 months to finish the Bad Batch, I'd be like, that's a bit of a shame. Hopefully I won't get any spoilers. But if you told me that when watching Rebels, I'd be like, I will kill you. I will gut you. But so, I don't know if you feel similarly. I'm like, I am enjoying it, but I haven't got it hasn't grabbed me in the same way, I'd say.
The season one I thought was pretty fire. I was pretty pumped about it. I liked it, but now this season is just kind of taking kind of a slow ride. And I mean, it's up there. It's on second on my list, I'd say, for
nice.
Rebels, and then 07 Clone Wars. The last 2 seasons were really good.
Oh yeah.
That they, them were pretty epic. And so, but the Resistance, I never got into that. I mean, obviously the old school, the Ewoks and droids cartoons were cool, man. You can't.
Classics.
You can't. You don't really have a comparison with them, because in their time era, they were awesome.
That was the argument in Star Wars fandom at that point. Is the Ewoks? What do you like more, the Ewoks cartoon or the Ewoks movies?
Right.
that was the canon then. You get the Heir to the Empire trilogy, and then you got the Ewoks series and movies and droids, and that's all you get for like years.
Man, we built a lot of conversations that we can run off here for future shows, because I'd like to have you back on and touch on some of these. Is there anything? Yeah. Is there anything that you got coming down the pipe soon, or anything that you're working on besides the comics side of things?
Yeah, so it will be out by the time, whenever this comes out, because my episode that I've been editing today will be released tomorrow. So the most recent thing being released for me is the High Republic book review for Quest for the Hidden City. So I'd say with stuff coming out of me, I do a bit of everything. So Genuine Chit-Chat, I'm always trying to be quite a wide variety of stuff. Sometimes I have, Star Wars guests on, but other times I don't. And if I have, I try not to have like 2 authors in a row. I try not to have 2 musicians in a row. I try to keep that quite varied. So every couple of weeks it's something completely different over there. And there is something in the pipeline, another Star Wars content creator or a Star Wars author that I'm currently in talks with. I'm not going to say who, because, in case it doesn't happen.
Right.
But there should be, in the next couple of months, another conversation with a Star Wars author. So I'm very excited about that. And then, it's really my Star Wars comics and canon show. So it's the kind of, if I'm allowed to do, am I okay to plug my own stuff again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I didn't want to supersede. I didn't want it to be like, I've got one more question. Well, thank you. So comics and canon, one of the things, my little plug for it is, if you've never read a Star Wars comic in your life, or if you've read every Star Wars comic, which I'll be very impressed because there's a lot, if you've never delved into canon or anything, I've designed the show specifically in a way that no matter whether you've read the comics or not, you can enjoy the show. So the whole idea of it is each show is under an hour, And I basically go through a collection of Star Wars comics. It's usually either a mini series or an arc within an ongoing series. So, you know, between 4 and 6 issues usually. And I go through the plot details, chronological order of the comics, and I give you sort of the footnote versions of what happens, maybe, you know, important things that happen in the story. But I don't tell you all the fun little bits that happen in the side, because I'm trying to encourage people to pick up more Star Wars comics. And then it means if you listen to my show and then you pick up a Star Wars comic, you'll still have something enjoyable to read through. You know, if you know the main draws of the story, there's little bits I intentionally don't put in there that don't contribute to the wider canon, but are fun things for when people read. So I go through the plot details, and then along the way, I specifically talk about connections to other content. So if occasional species pop up, I'll then give a little bio on them for a minute or so, certain planets to pop up or events that are connected. Quite often in the earlier days of the podcast, when I was doing like Shattered Empire, the miniseries, and a couple of other things, Operation Cinder came up quite a lot, which obviously is the main sort of draw of the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign on the recent one, not the Legends one from PS2 days. But yeah, it's basically it's a way for people to get into the comic realm of Star Wars, the canon comic book realm, because I think it's very underrated. A good way for people to listen to that, and then if there's any stories that I tackle that I really hype up or that you like the sound of, like Dr. Aphra or Vader, people can then choose to pick them up themselves. But it's a way that if you are a big Star Wars fan, but you don't have the money or the time to be able to consume the sheer volume of Star Wars content that there is, I made a specific effort to tackle every single piece of High Republic content that there is. So I've done book reviews for all of them. They start off spoiler free, so just my thoughts. So if you want to pick up the book but you don't want any spoilers, then in my book reviews are in 3 parts. So spoiler free, mild spoilers, which is very vague bits, maybe stuff that's mentioned in the first couple of chapters, and then I give major spoiler warnings, and then I give a full plot overview and pick out some parts that I quite liked about the book as well. So it's meant to be a vessel that, however much canon content you want to consume, you can listen to all of my episodes, and there's still plenty of books to read. Occasionally I'll be like, oh, this is a really good Clone Wars story, like Brotherhood by Mike Chen. Like, I've done a book review of that as well. So it's a
very
bit
good,
cheap,
by the way.
Yeah. The book itself or my review?
Your review. Well, the book's great. Your review was great too.
Thank you very much for the kind words there. I was going to say, yeah, the book's amazing, but if you compliment me, I was like, which you are, thank you. I was like, yeah, the book is incredible as well. But like, my reviews are giving my thoughts, but it's kind of what I took from the book, some standouts and things, and how I think it compares to other stuff. So the book reviews are, anyone can listen because they start spoiler free. But then the comic episodes, I'm like, you can start from episode all the way back in episode 1. You can just pick and choose. On YouTube there are playlists, so if you just want to hear everything cool about Vader, you can just go to my Vader playlist and just listen to all of the comics. They're in chronological order, and I'm currently up to date. So I'm up to date with every single canon Marvel Star Wars comic that there is, apart within about 2 months, because there's certain issues that are coming out. There's like the Han Solo and Chewbacca comic series at the moment, and there's 10 issues of that. It's going to be 10 and then it'll be finished. And I think issue 8 is out now. So I'm not going to tackle, I've done part 1, issues 1 to 5, but I haven't done part 2 yet because I'm waiting for obviously 10 to come out. So within reason, friends, I am doing all of them. I'm doing all the crossovers. So there's the War of the Bounty Hunters crossover, which was 34 issues all connecting together. There's the Crimson Reign, which is similar. Then there's Hidden Empire. So it's really just a great way for you to either get into Star Wars comics in the canon, to listen to the content and widen your horizons on canon content, or if you just want to hear loads of book reviews, or you just want to know what is in the High Republic. You don't even have to fully listen. You just go on my High Republic playlist. Everything's in order of when the books are, and I always explain at the start, this is where it fits in the timeline, So my goal is just to try and get more people reading Star Wars comics and Star Wars books without excluding them, with trying to open them bring people in with open arms. So that's kind of the mission statement for Comics and Canon. Whereas Genuine Chit-Chat, as you very cleverly said very early on in this conversation, with the honest conversations part, that the tagline is honest conversations with interesting people. So it's really just anyone who I find interesting, and if got something interesting to say, I want to try and shine a spotlight on them. And as you said, the recent one with Rathika Rao, really good episode about Buddhism and stuff. You don't have to be a Buddhist to appreciate it. You can be of any religious beliefs. My whole spiel with both of my podcasts is about acceptance, trying not to be negative about stuff, but being able to critique things. And when negative things in life come at you in Genuine Chit-Chat, how to deal with them, how to deal with loss and depression and grief, all that sort of stuff. So just like yourself, Stevie, I'm just trying to spread positivity into the world through the lens of stuff I like, and then connecting with other people who like the same sort of stuff or generally want to spread the same level of positivity, which is one of the reasons I was so excited to speak with you today. I was saying to Megan, I was like, I'm really excited about this
Thanks,
podcast because she's out tonight, because you just do exactly the kind of things that I pride myself in, and I just appreciate. It's quite easy for people in the Star Wars fandom especially to be negative about a lot of things, about the Disney canon, about Legends being better or whatever, and it's like you can critique something without being a dick about it, and that's what you do, and that's what I really, really appreciate it. So I really thank you for letting me come on your show. And if anyone wants to follow me on social media, it's at Genuine Chit-Chat on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. I put snippets of Genuine Chit-Chat episodes on there, normally 30-second or minute-long snippets, so you can get a little taste of the conversations I have. And I take photos of my comics because I have them all physically, and so you can see some occasional comic panels I think are cool, but without, you know, overtly spoiling it for people just scrolling through their feed, you know. So it's a good way to keep up to date with me. But the YouTube channel has got everything from both Comics in Canon and Genuine Chit Chat, and that is youtube.com/genuine chit chat. That was a lot of talking, but thank you.
No, that was great. You can get a drink of water now if you need to, or take a breath. I'm just kidding. Mike, you're excellent. And I was so excited. And you know, he is a busy guy, folks. He's really involved. He does hard work, puts in great effort. It's incredible. The playlist thing I was going to mention, I mean, you got playlist, whatever you're into, he's got it ready to go for you at your fingertips, easy to get to. It's perfect. I was so excited for this myself because, yeah, you give off the same kind of the vibe, you know. It's just chilling with other fans, having fun conversations, being honest, respectful. That's what it's all about. Brings us together. Through this conversation alone, there's so many more things that I want to talk to you about. I could sit here for another 2 hours talking with you, if I'm being honest, but I know it's late over by you. I got to go pick up the kids from school soon. So
that's the more important thing.
Yeah. There's a couple fun questions I want to ask you. I ask everybody. Yeah. I know they're pretty simple, but it's fun. And sometimes it catches somebody off guard because they don't think 100%. About them. But if in the Star Wars galaxy, what kind of character would you want to be or portray?
So I'm going to cheat here and give 2 answers. If I was single, I would fully go into being, depending on what time of the galaxy, I would be in the Navy or in the Rebellion, or basically flying for the good guys. Probably I'd like to think of myself as a Jedi or a grey Jedi, like this sort of Ahsoka or Kanan. I would like to think of myself as that. I feel like I do have a degree of connection with the universe, not necessarily more than anyone else, but because I don't believe in a specific deity or religious thing, I'm just kind of energy with the universe. A lot of what Star Wars says, you know, about everything being connected, it does align with beliefs I already sort of had. So I like that element, but I think if I was single, it would be going off, fighting evil, you know, doing the right thing. But in a relationship, I think if you're in Star Wars in a relationship, it just always ends badly. So I think I would just want to be like Dexter Jettster and have a little cafe and just know lots of people going off doing crazy adventures, but they can kind of come in and be like, Mike, what's this weird thing? And I go, oh, that's an ancient Sith relic from this time. And, you know, I would like to be the Dexter Jettster character. And he's actually appeared in the High Republic, even in Phase 2, which is 350 years before the Phantom Menace. So that's 360 odd years before when we saw him in Attack of the Clones. He's alive. His friends of Mars Kanata, and he's telling his stories in Mars's castle like 400 years prior, and it's incredible. So I would want to be Dexter Jettster if I've got a safe, comfy life, and if not, I want to be going out into the universe fighting evil.
Well, yeah, that's pretty good. You can have your own podcast of what we're podcasting about.
Exactly.
In the Star Wars galaxy. There you go.
That'd be amazing.
And then give them a cup of tea or something, you know.
Blue milk.
So yeah, what would your character's name be?
I actually thought about this because I had an idea for a Star Wars character a little while ago. So I think I quite like it when they do the thing where they like swap parts of people's names over.
Oh yeah.
So it'd be probably like so obviously my name's Mike Burton. So it'd be something like it's like Bike Merton or like Mert Bicon. Like Mert is quite a Star Warsy name, so I think I'd be like Mert Bicon, I think, but not spelt in the same way. I do like but God, I'm forgetting myself. But oh my god, what did I even say?
Merc.
Merc. That was it. Merc. So
Yeah.
M-U-R-K or M-U-R-C, I think is more Star Warsy. So
Yeah, that'd be
Merc,
C, yeah.
and then like Bicon, and so it'd be like B-Y-K-O-N. I think it'd be
All right.
that would probably be it. And I think there's an idea I had that it may have already been in Legends, it may be in canon already, or some poor author might be writing it. And if they are, I didn't steal this from anyone. But if anyone hears me says you could use it for your Star Wars novel, literature, whatever. But it's the idea of someone who is like a Jedi or a space adventurer, but they get like they're so in tune with the Force that when they're on a planet, they get motion sickness.
Okay.
Because obviously the spin of a planet, and because of centrifugal force, I think it's called, we don't really feel the move. Obviously, Earth is moving thousands of miles an hour. We don't really feel it.
Right.
So I'd like to think of an idea that someone is so in tune with the Force that they can literally feel the planet moving all the time, and they get sick, so they have to like spend most of their time in space. I just think that's such a cool idea for a character, and I would just so in tune with the Force is actually an issue. It's actually problematic, and it's causing you inconvenience. I really like that idea. So that would be a random offshoot character of if I was truly Merc Bicon.
I never thought of it like that, man. That's pretty clever. That's a pretty clever idea.
If I had more time, if I won the lottery and never had to work, then I'd write a Star Wars book. But I don't have time, unfortunately. So I just throw my ideas into the stratosphere.
How about your favorite lightsaber color? I know that's a pretty common, easy one, but everybody's different, you know?
Yeah. So my Legends answer is black, because in the Force Unleashed game, which is the dark saber, basically, in the Force Unleashed game, you could get collectible holocrons, and it would change the color of your lightsaber, and then you could change it to anything. And I remember finding the black lightsaber crystal, and I was like, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And I used to always, when I used to play that game, I used to complete it over and over again. I used to always go straight to that level, get the black lightsaber, and then start the game and with the black lightsaber and go through it. So in Legends it was black, but in canon there is no. The black lightsaber is the dark saber.
Right.
So the dark saber is very cool, but I think when I was playing Fallen Order, I changed my lightsaber color so many times because I love the purple. I love it, but I also quite like the pink because it's like a slightly less aggressive purple, and Ty Yorick of the High Republic has that, and she's one of my favorite characters. But you know, it's so hard to fight against the classic blue or green. It's so hard because they're so cool. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna go for just classic blue. Like my boy Obi-Wan, I think I'm gonna go for just the classic blue. What am I right? Would you choose green? Would that be yours? Yeah, green. I thought you choose green because I assumed Luke Skywalker's lightsaber in episode 6 is your favorite.
Yep. Yes. And so that would kind of leads into my next question. So Ty Yorick would say is your all-time favorite Star Wars character, or is that in the newer canon, or you got one for both?
Okay, it's tough. It's very tough for me because if anyone listens to my show a lot, I basically say everyone's my favorite character. So in Legends, my favorite character is probably Starkiller. So Galen Merrick, you know, obviously Sam Witwer's character, the person who's tattooed on me. But then I really like Darth Bane, but I actually think Darth Zana, I think she's a lot more interesting than Bane. I think Bane, as cool as he is and badass, and how amazing it'd be to see him in live action, I think that as a character, the intricacies of what Zana can do and what she's capable of is a lot more intriguing to me. She, I think, has a lot more potential. She's a lot more different. You know, Bane is just like 9 or 10 out of 10 for power, lightsaber ability, intelligence, everything. He's kind of like boring amazing. He's almost like the Superman of the Sith. Whereas Zana's a bit more different. She's not as unbeatable as Bane, but she's got so many more intrigue. She's clever. Yeah. So I think Zana's probably my favorite Legends character outside of Galen Merrick. And then in the canon, I'd say, I mean, Obi-Wan is kind of my all-time favorite. It's one of the reasons I got the Mustafar battle on me. And why I was so excited by the Kenobi show and Ewan McGregor. I used to idolize the prequels. Ewan McGregor, I used to be like, he is the epitome of what a good, true Jedi in person is.
Yes.
So I think him is kind of the boring favorite. But outside of him, Kanan is my favorite Jedi, I would say. But I'm going to throw a curveball and say the character that brings me the most joy when they're on screen, and that is Hondo Ohnaka.
Oh, okay.
I love any time, and Megan's really into it as well. So whenever we watch, like, whenever we're watching a new live action show, we're like, when's Hondo going to show up? Is he going to? We're begging because there's already a live action version of him in Galaxy's Edge in Star Wars.
Yeah, I heard that. Yes.
In Disney World and stuff, which I am hopefully going to next year, which I can't wait for. But Hondo in Rebels and in Clone Wars, like whenever I say Hondo, Megan goes Kenobi, and it's hilarious. So anytime Hondo comes on screen, he's just so funny, and he screws everyone over, but he's kind of lovable, and everyone like Kenobi doesn't like him, but he really puts up with him so much. And if it was anyone else, he'd be in like prison, but Kenobi just kind of vaguely gives him a pass all the time. And I just love a character that is like could kind of get away with anything, but always his own greed always kind of screws him over, but he never learns.
That's cool.
So
yeah.
I just think he's such a fun character, and I just want so much more of him. And whenever he's popped up in like 2 comics ever, and one of them was the Galaxy's Edge tie-in comic, and every time I see him, I'm like, man, look where it is.
That's awesome. I tried to get my wife to call me Mr. Skywalker sometimes, but she won't do it.
I'd get a slap if I did that.
I put my hood up. I even put my plastic lightsaber in my hip, but she wasn't going for that.
I said to Megan we should call our whenever we have children and stuff, call our child Juan and call the middle name Kenobi. And she was like, I am never ever letting you do that to our child. Right. Do you know how much bullying they would get? I was like, yeah, they'd be bullied a lot. They would build character and also be very funny.
Yes. And he'd probably appreciate that later on in life.
maybe yeah. Or he may if he doesn't like Star, if he's a Trekkie,
then
you regret forever.
Mike, it's been a pleasure, man. This has been fun. Like I said, we got to get back together because there's a lot of fun conversations to have here for sure.
100%.
It was a blast. Everyone listening, you got to check him out. I'll link his channel, his Instagram, all of his other handles. Yeah, phenomenal, fun. Yeah, there's a bit of something for everyone besides Star Wars. If there's something there. It's great. You present yourself well. You're well-spoken, man. It's a pleasure. I love listening to you. I'm glad you're on the channel. I'm glad you came on. I can't say enough. Yeah.
I really appreciate all the kind words. It's very sweet and it's very humbling, and I appreciate that. I'm just always trying to be better than I was yesterday. So it's just always, so people listen to those earlier episodes of Comics in Canon. Don't forget that. I'm always trying to improve.
We're all learning. We're all on the journey together, right? So there you have it, folks. Genuine Chit Chat. The host, Mike Burton, Star Wars Comics and Canons. I hope you enjoyed this. Like it, share it. Tell your grandma to watch it. Mine does. I mean, she's got a channel now. I'll link that too. She does skateboarding stuff.
Oh,
she's
wow.
77 years. No, I'm just kidding. She doesn't do skateboarding stuff. But
that would be so cool.
Okay? No.
Oh, teasing me because I heard you talk about your grandma on one of the other podcasts.
She watches.
Hi, Grandma.
She's like, you got another one coming out, so I got to talk about her. My grandma's a sweetheart. I was a grandma's boy. But
shout out.
Hey, yes, absolutely. But anyway, Genuine Chit Chat. Check them out. That's it, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, see you guys soon.